Alan Quinlan is joining us live now from God's country, Limerick. Alan, 11 years ago, you were part of a Munster team that beat Saracens in the Ricoh Arena to get through to a Heineken Cup final. I can't imagine you thought back then, though, that this would be the last time Munster would be getting there for at least 11 years, 6 semi-final defeats since then. It's been quite a while, hasn't it?
Yeah, it has. There's been a lot of disappointments, Neil. Some happy memories. I was thinking about that this morning. The Ricoh Arena, that was a nervy enough performance from us that day against a Saracen side who we were fancy to beat. I think against all the odds, they nearly beat us, and we underperformed that day. And they're back to Coventry again, and unfortunately, as you said, Munster have had a fair few disappointments in semi-finals, losing 6 of them. I was just thinking about that in the last few days. Will their luck change? Are they good enough to make it change? I'm not sure. This is a game it's a completely different Saracen side who were overwhelming favourites. They averaged 28 points a game in the pool stage. It's the only side to win all their pool games convincingly. So they average 4 tries a game as well. So you start thinking it's a different scenario than back in 2008. But you know, Munster have a pedigree. It's their 14th semi-final, and you just wonder, will their luck change a little bit? Are they good enough? Is probably the more relevant question, and it's going to be a very, very difficult game for them, given the possibility of Keith Earls being missing now, on top of Joey Carberry not going to be available. Yeah,
I was just going to say, like you mentioned, Munster's luck potentially changing. It doesn't seem like it's going that way now over the last couple of days with the news that Keith Earls is probably going to miss out. Like, how big a blow is that going to be? We saw it against Edinburgh in the quarter-final. Just 2 little snipes is all he got in pretty much the entire game. He was over for 2 tries. A full-on game breaker is what Keith Earls is, and to have him absent, that is massive.
Yeah, it is. It's usually disappointing for him if he doesn't play. Games like this, Neil, I think are the small margins. You might get 1 or 2 line breaks. You might get a little opportunity, and you think someone like Keith Earls is the person who will create that or be on someone's shoulder if they make a line break and get a score. I think both sides are very strong defensively, so there might be the opportunities might be limited, but. He's a huge loss to miss him, and I think there's a lot of pressure on Tyler Blandell to try and bring a big performance as well with Joey Carberry out. So you want kind of X-factor players who can create something out of nothing in big cup games, and Keith Earls and Joey Carberry are 2 guys that unfortunately Munster can ill afford to lose. But their attacking game this year hasn't been good enough, I don't think, at times. They were very good in Gloucester, I suppose, in round 5. The performance in Exeter in round 1 was a real kind of show of steel and resilience and passion. So they have the capability going there. I think the worry is, where will the tries come from? Where will the scores come from?
Yeah, and like you mentioned there, you alluded to Saracens, like an average of 34 points and 4 tries in a game. Munster's attacking problems, they've the lowest number of the lowest average metres per game of any side in the competition, even aside from teams that didn't even get through to the quarterfinals or the semi-finals. So how do they go about, on one hand, narrowing all that down on Saracen's side and pushing everything out on their own side in attack?
I think for Munster to have any chance, they've got to frustrate Saracens, which is very difficult to do because they have so much power and so much quality throughout their team. So they've got to, what's been good from this year is their defence. They've been the best defensive side in the pool stages, and so they've got to try and stay really, really connected in defence, not give up any soft scores, and frustrate Saracens and maybe win a turnover or 2 from Tygburn, from Stander, from O'Mahony, and get some energy and lifts out of that and play in the right areas, and hope that they can force Saracens into a real dogfight and bring the intensity level up to a place maybe that Saracens may not be used to going. They're used to being a dominant side in most games they play. They've only lost 5 games this season. Some of those were in the Premier. They were in the Premiership when they were missing a number of their internationals. So they don't tend to lose games with their full strength side. So Munster have just got to be really, really efficient. They turned the ball over a number of times in that first half against Edinburgh, and it nearly cost them. So they've got to be so much better. They'll know that themselves. I'm sure they've worked on it in the last few weeks. But they've just got to deliver 8, 9, possibly some 10s out of 10 performances for the players, and hope that they can just turn the tide a little bit on Saracens and put some pressure on them. But it's hard to see it happening, Neil. I know you want to see it happen. Keane wants to see it happen. I want to see it happen. But
we want to see it happen for the benefit of Irish rugby, Alan. No parochial biases or anything like that.
I'll
for the benefit of Irish rugby.
How good would it be to have a Leinster-Munster final? It'd be incredible.
Absolutely.
And, I just think, look, they have a shot. You know what I mean? If I was in that dressing room, I'd be just thinking, right, we've got to throw everything at this. This isn't a game where they sit back. And 2 years ago, they sat back and they tried to slow the game down, and they kicked the leather off the ball in the semi-final in 2017. Munster's biggest strength that I've seen the last number of years, when they've played really well and dominated teams, is when they hold on to the ball and they don't overcomplicate the game plan, but they can bring the number of phases into the 20s, and that tires teams out, and it has an effect. I know it's very attritional, but I think that's what they've got to do tomorrow. They need the work rate through the roof from the players, and hope that they can just be really strong defensively and have a good set piece. So, and then if an opportunity too comes, that they take it. And if they were to get into a situation where they nudge themselves in front, and they stay within touching distance or even ahead of Saracens going into the second half, well, then that belief and that confidence will start to grow. And there's a lot of big characters in that Munster side, and there'll be a real hunger and the desire to try and compete. So part of me says, look, and the reality is most people would say, look, Saracens are just too strong, but I just have a sense and a feeling that because Munster are not expected to win this game, that they might give it a real good crack.
They have to be brave, Quinny, don't they? I mean, you mentioned the game in 2017. I was watching it back during the week. It was kind of easy to forget because of the full-time scoreline, but Munster were only 6-3 down at half-time. But they didn't really fire a shot at all, did they? And you think about Saracens, they were probably in the dressing room going, we have you right where we want you now, because they just upped it in the second half then and pulled away from them. Munster have to fire a shot this time. You talk about Tyler Blainall, a bit of a different type of out half to Joey Carberry, but I think he's going to have to take the ball to the line. I think someone like Chris Farrell is going to be absolutely vital. We've seen he can run through players, he can run over them, but he's also got the passing game, as we saw for the build-up to Keith Earls' second try in Edinburgh. So they're going to have to throw the ball around a little bit as well, not get sucked into a mad Harry Carey game with Sarries, but they're going to have to be a little bit brave, aren't they?
Yeah, I think so. It's a very good point, Keane. They have to really go for this, because there's no point in sitting in a dressing room afterwards thinking, well, we tried to contain them, keep the score down, and hope that that we kept ourselves in it with 10 minutes to go. And that I don't think that's going to happen here. You've got to try and play against good teams, and how you do that is hold on to the ball yourself and be intelligent with what you're trying to do. I have no issue with them kicking, because overplaying in their own half is going to force mistakes and put pressure on themselves. Just kicking intelligently and just forcing Saracens into mistakes, and hope then that they can build a real tempo through their own team and match them physically. Saracens try to physically dominate teams, and so being brave isn't about throwing the ball all over the place. It's just having the ability and the confidence to maybe throw in an offload and just put pace and tempo into the game, and try and instill a belief that if they get going, they're not going to get through this with a subpar performance. They need to, really get it on the money here, everybody throughout the team. And look, they have a chance. It's very difficult, and bravery is probably something that you'd never question of a Munster team, but just intelligence and bravery together will certainly help them.
Yeah, Alan, you mentioned throwing the ball all around the place there a minute or so ago, and I think that brings us nicely to Toulouse against Leinster. Toulouse have just been an absolute joy to watch again. I don't know, is it just the age I am and the kind of era when I would have started really getting into rugby, but it just feels right to see a Toulouse team playing like this again.
Yeah, it's I tell you, in round 5, Neil, when they came to Dublin, there was a real sense of this Toulouse side can beat Leinster, and Leinster were missing a number of internationals, and they were on the back of an incredible run, Toulouse, and Leinster just out-muscled them on the day, frustrated the life out of them, held on to the ball so well, made very, very few mistakes and just wore them out. And at the end of that game, I think when Adam Byrne goes in for the bonus point try, I thought that's an incredible performance from Leinster. They just never give Dupont, Intimac, Ramos, any of these guys a sniff of the ball. And they were brilliant on the day. And they've got to do the same again on Sunday, because I think this Toulouse side has got better since that game. You could argue and say, well, look, it was a marker and this is Europe and it's different than the top 14 and this is where Leinster are at and this is where you can win all the games you like in the top 14, but this is the real deal. And you had a sense of that after that game, that Leinster or Toulouse have got to go away and Europe is just a different kettle of fish. But they've been brilliant and got better since. And I think one of the key things about this Toulouse side is they've got fitter together. Their skill set has improved. They've been blowing teams away. They've only lost one game away to Toulouse in the top 14 since that game. And they're the type of side who can be porous in defence, but their attack game is just through the roof. Their confidence, their belief, their counter-attacking game. And they kind of send out a message that, look, if you score, that's mine. We're just going to go up the field and score ourselves next. So Leinster have got to be very, very wary. And the issue for Leinster at the moment is they're undercooked together as a team. The worry is that can they just turn up on Sunday? Leo Cullen will pick a side of quality for sure, but they've got to get it right early on in the game and lay down a marker, because I think they nearly got caught against Ulster in that quarter-final. Mm-hmm. They've got to be so much better against this Toulouse side, because they will create opportunities and they will probably learn from that game in round 5. Yeah,
you mentioned the possibility of, an undercooked Leinster. They struggled maybe at times against Ulster a few weeks ago in the quarter-final. I saw in the Irish Examiner this morning, Brendan O'Brien wrote that Leinster have used 44 players over the last 3 games. And on one hand, it's fantastic. Their home semi-final in the Pro 14 wrapped up by the first week of March. But does it actually become a little bit difficult to manage the intensity and to manage the ferocity of your performances when everything is sewn up that early in a season and just trying to maintain things?
Yeah, it's been a strange few weeks for Leinster, because usually it's very it's not normal that a team has secured a home semi-final so early with so many rounds to go in the Pro 14. We'll know on Sunday evening whether that has helped them or not, because they're a side that like to be put under pressure. They like to keep that intensity within the group, and you could argue that maybe that intensity hasn't been there in the last few weeks, that high standard that we associate, no matter who plays for Leinster, that there's a real standard, and they've spoken about that over the years, many of their players. And, their draw against Benetton is un-Leinster-like. The loss last week against Glasgow, un-Leinster-like. I know that there was no significance to the league, but just psychologically, I think Leo Cullen would have preferred to have Robbie Henshaw, Toner, Ringrose, Sexton, all these guys playing last week and playing for 50 or 60 minutes and get him hit out, given what happened in the quarter-final. But that hasn't happened, that he's been able to get everybody out in the field. There's a number of changes again. So it is a concern. Are they good enough to turn up at the Aviva and get it right on Sunday? For sure they are. Mm-hmm. But they've got to start the game well. And if they give Toulouse any sort of confidence or self-belief, or let them get any sort of early scores in the game, it could be a difficult day for them.
Okay, Quinny, I know you have to go very quickly though. 2 words. Who's your final? No explanation, just two teams.
Saracens, Leinster.
Okay, Quinny, you traitor, get off the line.
No, I'm going to say Munster.
Quinny, cheers for joining us. All the best. Enjoy the matches of the weekend. Look, as much as you might love to see Munster and Leinster, it is just hard to argue with just the sheer facts of it all. Saracens are the team to beat in this campaign, Keane, at the moment. And it's no disrespect to Munster to say that, Saracens probably are on paper big favourites at the very least.
No, they definitely are, and they're getting their players back at the right time. Like I mentioned earlier, you look at Owen Farrell coming back into the team. How many points was it? 50 odd they scored against Glasgow in the quarter-final without their chief playmaker, which is phenomenal. Mako Vunipola might be back. Brad Barrett is going to be back. It looks like He's a player who's massively important to what they do. So they're getting their big guys back. Munster are missing a couple of them. But like I was saying to Quinny there, the biggest thing for Munster is to fire a shot. They didn't do it last year in Bordeaux against Racing. They were nearly worse again at the Aviva against Saracens because it was such a negative game plan. Like Quinny was saying, they kicked the leather off the ball. So as long as they go out and fire a shot, I think they'll be happy with where they've got. Not that they'll be happy to lose in the semi-final, don't get me wrong, but as long as they show a better version of themselves.